and I want to welcome everyone to this fourth of our online community of practice webinars for Literacy and Basic Skills Ontario. This webinar is being brought to you by the steering committee that has organized this session of webinars for our literacy and basic skills practitioners, employment services colleagues, and others who work with us under the Employment Ontario umbrella in particular. And this morning, I'd like to welcome Sarah Wieczek from the Mental Health Association office in Niagara, who is our presenter. We very much appreciate Sarah making herself available to us to speak about a topic that very much affects many practitioners working in literacy and basic skills programs. So Sarah, thank you for joining us, and if I may, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for logging in this cold morning. It's rather cold here in Niagara, but we have no snow as of yet. I just again like to thank everyone for logging in, and to Sarah Stalker from Contact North. She's been a great support to me with this preparation of the webinar. I hope today that you can take away one thing from what we've talked about and share it with your colleagues and implement it in the work that you do with your clients on a day-to-day basis. I see that the poll here, what I wanted to know was, how often do mental health issues come up in your program? And I'm seeing a high number in the quite frequently that you're dealing with individuals on a day-to-day basis with mental health issues. As you know, my name is Sarah Wieczek, and I've worked in supported employment for many years in different capacities. I've worked in acquired brain injury. I've worked in streamlined employment under Employment Ontario funding, and now I'm working at the Canadian Mental Health Association of Niagara in our Real Work program, which is the employment division that is funded under Employment Ontario and the Opportunities Fund. I currently am a mental health works trainer, and I will explain that a little bit more in future slides. So without further ado, let's get started.
Could I just take a moment to ask if our listeners could give me a green check mark if they can hear Sarah. Sarah has been trying to turn up her system as much as possible this morning, but she's also dealing, I think, with a kind of a raw throat and is trying not to cough. So if any of you are a little bit challenged hearing her, please turn up your speaker volumes to the maximum as well. And I know Sarah's going to continue to try to speak as loud as she can. So thank you. I can see, Sarah, that there is something happening with the presentation in terms of not coming up the way it should. What I think I'll do is, if I can just ask you to pause for a second, I will try to import it again and see if it will behave a little better. Is that okay with you?
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. Everyone, we're just waiting for this presentation to come back up in the screen. There we go, Sarah. and no one was speaking at the moment. We were just re-uploading it because it wasn't behaving as we had anticipated it would. So Sarah, I'll go back to you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So today, what I hope that we will get to, and that you will take away from today is how do we identify signs and symptoms of common mental health issues? So the obvious and the not so obvious signs and symptoms, we'll talk about those things. How does mental health affect your clients? How do they respond to their mental health? How do we start the conversation? How do we talk as professionals to our clients about what we're observing, what we're seeing? Um, how do we start talking to the individual about some of the struggles we see? I'll talk to you a little bit about Mental Health Works, and I'll give you some resources around that. And then the last one is I'm going to give you some resources that I find you can access across Ontario, as well as some links that you can look at where there might be some supports within your own community, because I know there's individuals from across Ontario. So I hope that I can give some good resources that you can tap into to add to this presentation. So I'm going to define a few things here. And what is mental health? Mental health is a state of well-being in which we as individuals realize our own abilities, that we cope with the normal stresses of life, and that we can work productively and are able to make a contribution to our community. Mental health means being able to strike a balance in all aspects of our life, so socially, physically, spiritually, economically, and mentally. Mental health is as important as physical health, and that is so key. Calling in sick because you're struggling with your mental health is just as important as calling in that you have a cold or the flu. It's so important. And I do apologize. I am trying to speak as loudly as I can in this speaker. I hope that helps there. What is a mental health problem? Mental health problem refers to the more common struggles that affect everyone from time to time. When going through difficult times, such as a relationship ending, whether that's an intimate relationship, any type of familiar relationship, when that ends, when there's a death of a family member, a friend, a pet, when there's conflict in someone's life, when there's stress of school, work, when an individual is feeling very stressed and having the blues, it's normal. Typically, these are short-term reactions to that stress, to the loss, to the painful events, or an illness that someone is dealing with. And what is mental illness? Mental illness is a medical term used to describe health problems that affect the way we think about ourselves, how we relate to others, and how we interact with the world around us. This can affect our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors. Mental illness can disrupt a person's life, create challenges, but with the right supports in place, a person can get back on a great path to recovery and wellness. So I just wanted to define some of those terms right at the beginning. Statistically, 1 in every 5, 20% of Canadians will personally experience a mental illness in their lifetime. I would think that those numbers are a little low. In Niagara, I can say that would mean 86,000 people, roughly the population of the city that I'm working in. That's a significant number. People with mental illness are twice as likely to have substance abuse problems along with their mental health. and why. Typically, someone with a mental illness will tend to self-medicate with different types of substance. Um, so they medicate the mental health symptoms that they find disruptive or uncomfortable by using. However, that does create a whole new batch of problems for the individual. Mental illness is a leading cause of disability in Canada. And in Canada, adults with depression, you're looking at about 8%, anxiety about 5%, and those are typically the two highest mental illnesses that are occurring. And bipolar and schizophrenia are at about 1%. I did get these statistics, and they were from CMHA CAMH in 2015, so relatively, current in the last year or so, almost 2 years now. It's almost 2017. So, and the last point that I make there is the percentage of Canadians with a mental illness who never receive help, 47%. Why that is? I can tell you that there's many reasons for that. One is stigma. There still is significant stigma out there around mental illness and what that means to individuals. And breaking down that stigma is so important. Individuals that don't recognize that they're struggling with a mental illness. They don't want the help. They don't recognize that they need the help. They don't know what resources out there. I often deal with individuals that once I've provided them resources, the first thing they say is, I didn't know this was out there. So not knowing what's out there to assist them. Sometimes there's wait lists. Accessibility. And when I talk about accessibility, I talk about whether that's geographically, someone's living where there is no, supports that are close to them, accessibility, maybe technologically they're not as savvy as somebody else that they could, research online. So accessibility can mean a lot of different things. And then financial reasons. So, yeah, 47%, I would say, is a significant number. And those are just some of the reasons. When we look at the impact of mental health conditions in a work environment, you're looking at 19% of cost towards absenteeism, 40% of turnover costs, so replacing an individual on a temporary or permanent basis due to an individual being on a sick leave for their mental health. 55% of employee assistance program costs. So the EAP program that an employer offers their employees, that's pretty significant. And 30% of short-term and long-term disability costs. 10% of drug plan costs. So that translates to $51 billion a year in lost productivity costs due to absenteeism and presenteeism. 500,000 Canadians each week are unable to work due to poor mental health. This includes approximately about 355,000 cases due to mental or behavioral disorders. So approximately 175,000 full-time workers absent from work due to mental illness. Those are significant numbers. Stigma, and like I've said, there's still a significant amount of stigma out there around mental illness. I put some more statistics in here because it just shows what stigma is still out there. Just 50% of Canadians would tell friends and coworkers that they have a family member with mental illness, compared to somebody that would say they have a family member with cancer at 72%, and somebody that would say their family member has diabetes at 68%. 46% of Canadians think people use the term mental illness to excuse bad behavior. I often hear that in day-to-day life in my profession, from family members, friends. 42% of Canadians are unsure whether they would socialize with a friend who has a mental health condition. Again, the stigma that is associated with mental illness, that individuals aren't aware of what mental health condition can look like and what it is. 64% of Ontario workers would be concerned about how work would be affected if a colleague had a mental illness. That's huge, that number. And 39% of Ontario workers indicate that they would not tell their managers if they were experiencing a mental health problem. When we look at causes of mental health conditions, we're looking at three spectrums. We're looking at biologically, socially, and psychologically. And I'm going to break those down a little bit more than what we see here. In terms of biologically, genetically, mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, aunt, uncle has struggled with mental illness, and in your gene, it's in an individual's genes, and heredity plays a factor. When we look at brain structure, neurotransmitters, so neurotransmitters are affected because there's a chemical imbalance in an individual's brain. Infections, sicknesses, any loss of oxygen to an individual's brain at an early age can play a significant role in mental health. Acquired brain injury, any type of infection in the brain can really bring on mental health conditions. Medication can do it, and lack of nutrition. Lack of nutrition in terms of potential deficiencies in our bodies. There's a correlation to B12 deficiency that there's been studies on, as well as exposure to toxins. So lead poisoning, when someone's exposed to that, there's correlation that there's to mental illness there. So biologically, those are a lot of different points to that one. Socially, cultural expectations, religious expectations, that can play a factor in someone's mental health. The stigma that is still out there, the prejudice that is still out there around mental health. Individuals that are struggling with homelessness plays a factor in mental health. And I wish I had numbers for you around that, because that is a significant point there. Someone that has struggled with abuse, any type of abuse, as a child, as an adult, can play significant factors in someone's mental health. Bullying is something that I see significantly with the individuals I'm working with that are teenagers, early 20s. Bullying, it's constant that I hear this with my clients, that has played a huge role in their mental health. The media, so social media, the media that's out there, TV, radio, whatever that may look like, has influenced somebody's mental health. So what should a girl look like? What size dress should she be wearing? What influences that have been placed on males, females, um, has increased tremendously over the last few years. And then the last one is relationships. So whatever type of relationship an individual is dealing with that is problematic, whether that's an intimate relationship, whether that's any type of familial relationship, that can play a significant role in someone's mental health. So when we look at the psychological aspects of mental health conditions, um, we look at how individuals respond to stress. We all deal with stress differently. We all we all can manage it differently, and our personality plays a factor. So how we are, what traits we come with, right? That we were born with, right? Our coping skills. So how do we cope with things can be very different than other people. So one thing that may cause me stress may not cause you stress, and vice versa. And being really cognizant of that everybody's coping, everybody's responses to stress are different. Um, and I'm jumping, sorry here, Sarah, I'm jumping a little bit, but when we look at patterns of negative thinking, um, you know, we, as individuals, as people, we typically go to the negative side of things versus the positive side of things, and training ourselves that, you know what, let's look at the positive before we look at those negative thoughts, right? Is so important. And my last point there, under the psychological aspect of mental health conditions, is trauma and loss. So when we look at somebody who's dealt with emotional, physical, sexual trauma, someone that's dealt with neglect, someone who's dealt with loss, a loss of a family member, a friend, loss of a job, loss of a pet, really any loss that this person has found significant for them really plays a factor in their mental health conditions. So I like this slide because it really shows all the different aspects, the biological, the social, and the psychological, and how they can all be intertwined, right? Not that everybody's that is dealing with mental health experiences all that. Those are just different types of traits, different things that individuals have dealt with or are dealing with that causes them the struggles with their mental health. So this is a continuum of mental health conditions, and it looks like there's a lot there, but I'll try to go through it and pinpoint some key things. If you look at the center of the continuum, when we're functioning well, when we have balance, when things are going a-okay in our life, that's where we should be. That's where we should be on our day-to-day basis. However, that's not always the case. So previously I talked about genetics playing a factor, trauma playing a factor, personal stress, and everybody's stress is different, playing a factor, and then workplace stress. So those four things, you throw that into the continuum, and then that balance is going to fluctuate. That balance is going to start moving. If we look to the right of the continuum, somebody who is experiencing high energy, so we call that manic. So when someone is where their energy is high, these stressors come in. They've dealt with trauma. They've genetically, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa have had it. Throw in a stressor for them. Their functioning, their balance is impaired. And we look at the opposite of that, to the left of the continuum, when someone has low energy, that is called depression. And again, when you throw all those personal stresses, someone's dealt with trauma in their life, genetically, again, that balance starts to fluctuate and their functioning is impaired. As well as at the top, when we look at somebody who is significantly worried, they fear things, that's considered anxiety or a phobia, and we're going to talk about those in more detail. Again, you throw in a stressor for that individual, you throw in trauma for that individual, and then again, their functioning, their balance is impaired. When we look at the bottom, someone who is distracted or withdrawn, they're hallucinating, or they're disassociating. And I'll define dissociation for you. Disassociation is a detachment of reality. On the low end of dissociation, it's how they cope. It's their coping mechanism, their defense to decrease stress for that individual. And on the higher end of dissociation, there's loss of memory, that they don't remember something they did, periods of time they don't remember. The word pseudo seizures comes, I think of, is an individual is having seizures and there is no medical reasons that they're having seizures. That all plays a factor with dissociation. So again, when someone is experiencing this, hallucinations, a dissociation, again, you throw in trauma, you throw in stress, their functioning is impaired. I like this continuum. It really shows how an individual's balance can really be affected, and how it can be impaired. So what I'm going to do is going to talk about different types of mental health. When we talk about anxiety, this is one of the most common types of mental illnesses. And some terms under anxiety is generalized anxiety, panic attacks, social phobias, post-traumatic stress, and obsessive compulsive disorder. Did you have a question, Jessica? Okay,
I think that Jessica had posed a couple of questions, Sarah. Sarah, I believe that Jessica was wondering whether, first of all, she's put in a couple of comments. She wondered if effects of a difficulty in birth could affect mental health as well, and she had also asked about let's see, whether dissociation can happen when you are experiencing a trauma. If you have any comments on those.
Yes, disassociation can happen when you are experiencing trauma. Absolutely, yes. In regards to your other question about loss of oxygen, yes, any loss of oxygen can cause mental health issues, and we could talk after, Jessica, if you in more detail about that if you'd like. Thanks, those are great questions. If I get back to talking about anxiety, things that you might see in individuals is they have a strong fear. It's a sense of impending doom or danger around everyday situations. So for that individual, their danger, their doom, um, it may not be the same as you and I, right? Everybody's stress, everybody's fear is different, right? So we need to be aware of that. Your client's fear, their impending doom may not be something you would see as danger or impending doom. So being mindful of that. You're going to see somebody who's their worry is uncontrollable. It's excessive. Um, they're distracted, they're irritable, they have rapid negative thoughts, so they can't think of anything positive to come out of a situation. They're focusing on the negative things that are happening in the situation. You'll see somebody who's could be sweating, um, that is dizzy, sleeping patterns are off, where they're not able to sleep, or their sleep is choppy, where they wake up often. Vivid dreams this individual has. Heart palpitations, that's very common. Like I said, fidgety, restlessness, muscle aches and pains. Um, did I say headaches? Yeah. Um, to a point where somebody's hyperventilating, um, shaking, um, gastrointestinal um, issues, or irritable bowel syndrome. There's been studies that those two are correlated. I've had numerous clients who've said to me, I'm dealing with anxiety, and in the next sentence they're saying, I have terrible IBS. So there is studies out there around that. When we look at depression, major depression, postpartum dysthymia, seasonal affectiveness disorder. Um, Individuals are feeling worthlessness. They're feeling a huge, overwhelming sense of guilt, doom and gloom. They've lost all pleasure in activities, their hobbies, their pastimes, their social activities, their sexual activity. They've lost all pleasure in any of those things. They're feeling exhausted all of the time, and they have no energy. They have either decreased amounts of sleep, or they've increased their sleep tremendously, where they're sleeping 22 out of the 24 hours of the day. The same with appetite. They're either overeating or undereating or not eating at all. Individuals that have problems with concentrating or focusing can appear when someone is dealing with depression. Their feelings and their behaviors are slowed down, or the opposite, where they're sped up. The self-loathing, the guilt that they may be feeling, those are all parts of that. And then my last point there is suicidal thoughts. And we could do a whole presentation just on suicide. And I will say that there's numerous trainings out there that you can take. There's a safe talk training, there's an assist training, that where it teaches you how to have the conversation, how to recognize individuals that may be having thoughts of suicide. So I won't get too much into suicide, because it could be a whole other presentation on. But just do know that there is various trainings out there that you could access. Again, safe talk and assist training are just two of the ones that I can mention. Bipolar. When we talk about bipolar, I'm breaking it down into bipolar 1 and 2. So when the individual has extreme to moderate feelings of high and low. And I'm just going to excuse myself.
Just give Sarah a second with
Sorry
that
about
raw
that.
throat. Okay, thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Um, So when we talk about feelings of high and low, an individual can experience elevated mood, and so where it's an extreme high. They're feeling like they're on top of the world. They're invincible. They have inflated self-esteem. They talk. They're talkative, and they don't stop. They keep continuously talking about a topic. They have grandiose plans and beliefs. Um, they it's an excessive, if that's the word I use. Um, they have no need to sleep or reduced need of sleep, where their energy just keeps going, and they don't require sleep. Um, they have increased energy, activity, irritability, um, and lack of inhibitions. So individuals will, go shopping and drop thousands and thousands of dollars on shopping in a short period of time and not think anything about it. Individuals will have, sexual indiscretions, or they'll make foolish business investments, and just not think about consequences of things they've done. Um, and then my last point there is can lead to possible psychosis. And the definition of psychosis is the loss of reality. Um, so that's bipolar in a nutshell. Where then they go um, to the low end of it, where their feelings of depression kick in. Um, when we talk about psychosis, um, the most common ones are schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, so organic or drug-induced, severe depression, anxiety, bipolar. Um, so when someone is experiencing a delusion, it's a false belief. They feel that they're being persecuted, or they're being controlled by an outside source. That something or someone is plotting against them. Um, they may think that they have special powers or gifts that they can use. Um, that they're being monitored, that somebody's watching them, that they're being controlled by some imaginary force, and they cannot tell what is real or not. When someone's experiencing a hallucination, um, there's loss of reality there. They're hearing voices, they're seeing, they're feeling, they're tasting, they're smelling things that aren't real, that are not there. Um, so an individual is having a difficult time managing academics, occupational, uh, and social functioning. It's impaired. Um, Disorganized thinking. Thoughts are jumping from one subject to another. There's no logical connection to them. It's jumbled. It's disjointed. It's all over the place, and it's a cognitive impairment. It's a lack of insight, and blunted emotions. When we talk about those psychosis types of mental illnesses. So how do we support somebody with a psychotic symptom? Again, I said delusions are fixed. They're difficult to change, and it can lead to unpredictable behavior in the individual. So avoid arguing with the individual. Let them know that you understand how they feel, but do not get into an arguing match about what is real, what is not real. That won't assist them effectively in the situation. Body language is key. So um, you know non-invasive, non-intimidating, supportive body language is going to be so key to assisting an individual that is dealing with this. Um, my third point there about connecting with the emotion, not the delusion. Show compassion, um, empathize with them. I use the phrase here, it must be frightening to believe that the Secret Service is after you. Um, so connect with them about how they're feeling, not what the delusion is, if that makes sense there. Stay calm and reduce the stressors that you feel might be aggravating the individual. Is it somebody in the room that's agitating them? Minimize that. Bring them into a quiet room. Again, keep your safety in check as well. Minimize the noise if there's music playing or if there's people, raising their voices. Try to minimize those things to keep the individual calm. And speak clear and slowly. You may have to repeat things to them so that they can process it and internalize it, right? Repeating step-by-step instructions is key, and giving them time to respond to you, right? And so that silence piece might be there, but give them time to respond, right? So those are some things that you can do to support a person when they're dealing with a psychotic episode. And then we're going to talk about, in general, mental health and how we address the problem with the individual. And I broke it down into 3 key components, and we're going to talk about those 3. The first being I notice, so visibly seeing something's going on with this individual. I give you examples. I've noticed, Sarah, you've missed quite a few classes. I've noticed you fall asleep in session, Sarah. I notice you look frustrated when you're completing this task or this worksheet. I noticed some changes in you. I noticed you are down today. So those are some key ones that you can use to really plant the seed and start the conversation, start the dialogue, the communication around what's happening here. The second one is I'm concerned. So you're now taking ownership of I'm concerned about your health. I'm concerned you're not sleeping. You look tired, Sarah. When did you begin feeling this way, Sarah? Did something happen that made you feel this way? Those are open-ended questions. It gives the opportunity for the individual to start disclosing whatever it is it may be, right? So I'll repeat those. I'm concerned you're not sleeping. You look tired. When did you begin feeling this way? Did something happen that made you feel this way? So asking it in different ways can help, right? Again, I will add those to the presentation and send her off at the end. So because those are key. And the third one. So is there anything I can do to help? Showing that you're there for them, that you want to support them. Other ways is how can I best support you? So putting it in their lap is what can you do? What do they need from you to help them? Have you thought about getting help? So planting that seed that there is resources out there, that there is support for them. Those are some key things that we can do on an everyday basis with our individuals that we see, that we're observing that something's just not the same that it used to be. So supporting somebody that's displaying anxiety, really pay attention to the verbal and the nonverbal cues that the individual gives you. So a nonverbal could be sweaty palms, rapid eye movement, no eye contact at all towards you. They sit, then they stand. They're edgy. They can't sit still, and they want to get out of there. Like it's 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 like they just want to flee. They want to get out of the conversation or the situation that they're dealing with. Those are some common things you might see somebody displaying anxiety. Um, you want to gently approach that. You don't want to be non-invasive. Excuse me. You want non-invasively. You want to approach this individual. Introduce yourself. Make sure that they're aware of who you are, and offer the assistance. That's so important. That there is resources out there. I will help you find them. I'm willing to help. Um, that empathy is huge, right? Being non-threatening to them and supportive is so key to them feeling that someone cares and that someone's there to help. Um, my third point there is let the person tell their story. And if someone feels comfortable, they've built rapport with you, they'll tell their story. That story may take some time, but do listen and actively listen, and do not judge. Do not judge the individual, um, because that will just shut them down. They'll build a wall with you, and you don't want that. So you want to actively listen and without judgment. A calm voice, expressing empathy, um, is so key. Um, Validating what they say. So repeating what they've said. So what I'm hearing is this, Sarah. Um, this is what I'm understanding from what you're saying. And so really validating to let them know that you are listening and that you do understand, right? Um, and then giving them the reassurance that there is help and that you'll find the resources and you will provide them the resources, um, is key, to assisting somebody with anxiety. How to support someone displaying strong symptoms. Again, expressing empathy, so validating their thoughts and feelings is so important. Showing respect, check understanding of what is being said by restating or summarizing what we said. So I've said those things in the previous slide. Listen non-judgmentally. Do not dismiss or minimize. Again, something that may be a stressor to you may not be, or a stressor to the client may not be a stressor to you. So we really need to take our own views into check, right? Do not argue with the person about their delusions and hallucinations. However, it is important not to pretend that they are real for you, and avoid being critical or confrontation with the individual. Give them reassurance and reinforce rules and boundaries. So keep calm, quiet voice, but yet be assertive with them. So what do we say to these? How do we de-escalate a situation? Introduce yourself, give your name and title, and ask them what they would like to be called. That puts ownership on them, right? Of call me Sarah, call me Mrs. Ivasick. So it really personalizes things with them. It's really important. Identify your purpose. So I notice this. I notice that you're experiencing this. Is there anything that I can do to help? So identifying it is so important. And then listening and validating, right, are key. Again, 3 ways to validate: agree with some of the truth or ask for more information about it, acknowledge their feelings, and if you can't agree with anything, repeat what they've said, just so that they know that they've been heard. And then set a plan to assist them. And team approach is always helpful. And whether that be your colleagues in the same office as you, another service provider, that team approach is always helpful. Setting clear limits, so being concise, keeping it simple, Give them time to process it. So let them absorb it, let them read it, let them think about it. And you may have to repeat it. You may have to write it down on paper for them so they visually see it versus verbally, right? And bottom line, you're working together to accomplish that individual's goal. So give them choices. Put the onus on them that what is it that you would like to help you be more successful in your recovery. And then always at the end, debrief with other coworkers, other colleagues, other service providers around the individual, because we're only human, and we are working with individuals that struggle with barriers. So please debrief and take self-care for you as the professional. Do ask questions. Do ask questions of somebody that's struggling with their mental health. Don't be afraid to ask how they are. Bring it up naturally in a conversation. They may want to talk about it, or they may not. It is important that you know, it's important for them to know that you're not avoiding it and that you're open to them to come and talk to, right? Asking questions, and it opens up then a lot more conversation when you do ask questions. Do think about your body language, so that non-invasive, maintaining eye contact. Even if they're not giving you eye contact, continue to try to, focus on them. Don't check your watch, don't make them feel like you're not listening. Make it as comfortable as possible for the individual. And try to be open-minded and non-judgmental, right? Avoid those jokes, those phrases like cheer up, put yourself together, have you lost your mind? That is not going to help the conversation. That's not going to help the individual. It's going to shut the individual down because they're not going to feel like they're being supported. Do ask how you can help. People, individuals, clients, they'll want support at different times in different ways. So ask how you can help now and in the future, and what things they would like to see put in place. That's so important. The don'ts: don't just talk about mental illness. Talk to them about other things in their life. They have other things in their life, not just their mental health. Whether that's something that that they enjoy or that they like, or that they have family or friends, talk to them about other things than just their mental illness. It's so important to build that rapport with them, that there is other aspects of their life that are going on, not just their mental illness. Don't avoid the issue. If someone comes to you to talk, don't brush it off. Acknowledge the courage it takes for them to come and talk to you about it. And it's so important that you let them know that you're there for them. And if you can't answer something, that you will find somebody that can answer it for them, or the support that they can get. So always giving them something to walk away with. Don't force it. Some people might want a text or an email. They won't pick up the phone when you call, so if you text them, then they respond. Or they may not want that face-to-face contact, right? Over the phone is how they best communicate, so that they can get back to you when they're feeling ready. It's important that you know that they'll be there, and you're ready to, help them when they want it. Don't harass or smother them. Once you've brought it up, once you've expressed your concern, don't feel like you have to keep an eye on them, or that you continually talk about it with them, right? You've planted the seed, and it's there, and let them approach it. Let them bring it up with you again, right? So when I talk about Mental Health Works, Mental Health Works is a program where it's person-centered, it's evidence-based. and it really focuses on solutions. So it builds mental health awareness on how to learn new skills to respond to situations that you're dealing with at work, so that your work environment is safe, and it's psychologically healthy. So what that means in a nutshell is that we want to build a healthy mental health awareness in your workplace. So whether that is um, manager to staff, coworkers to coworkers, coworkers to managers. So in the workplace, how are things working and how can they be more healthy in the workplace? Um, there's various um, presentations that we can do. There's 1 hour presentations, there's half day, and there's full day presentations that we can do. And it all focuses on improving the workplace mental health. It's so important because if you remember from the statistics about, they were quite high around mental health in the workplace. So Mental Health Works focuses on that. And we are they're all over Ontario. They're typically attached to one of the Canadian Mental Health Associations in your area, that somebody would be trained in Mental Health Works. And last but not least, this is some links, some resources in regards to, I thought about, okay, the audience is across Ontario. So I've added there the Canadian Mental Health Association of Ontario's website, as well as there's 32 Canadian Mental Health Association offices across Ontario that you can access, that are within your area, that are just like us here in Niagara. And then the CAMH, so the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health website, is a great resource. Another resource I added there was province-wide support lines. In every region, there's different support lines that an individual can access. So I just wanted to give you that, and as well as the link to the Schizophrenia Association of Ontario. Those are some good resources that you can access. I know in Niagara we've got the distress line. We've got Coastline as well. We've got various, we have Access Line, which is the mental health and addictions line. So in your immediate area, there will be various supports around supporting somebody with mental health. So I hope that this presentation has given you one piece of information, advice, support to help you with the individuals that you are working with. I greatly appreciate the audience. You've been wonderful, and Sarah, thank you so much for helping me with this. And wow, that was like perfect timing, I think. So thank you again, and I think there is a question there from Anne.
Please do click the raised hand icon if you have a question or a comment that Sarah could respond to. And while we're watching for these, I want to say thank you, Sarah, for so generously giving of your time and your expertise, especially on a morning when perhaps your throat wasn't quite as up to the task as it might have been. We very much appreciate the extra effort it took. So we're just watching to see if there are any questions or comments while we are still together. I know many of you have other things to move on to. It's always a busy work world, but are there any comments or questions for Sarah at this time before she leaves us? I'll just repeat that I will be sending out the webinar resources, and if any of you didn't get my messaging, I've put an email to reach us here at Contact North. I do sometimes get email bounces back from your addresses, and some of your systems may have firewalls, but uh, please use the address that I put in, and if you want me to try to resend something, I certainly will, and my contact information will be on that. Um, so I think we just see an awful lot of thanks to you, Sarah, for giving this great overview and all of this information. This is not something that's going to go away in our society and in our working world. So my thanks to you for being so helpful to all of us. Okay, I think that looks like we've reached the end of our time together this morning. I want to let you know that the messaging will come to your inbox later today with the presentation, and I think Sarah's going to send me some of the kinds of questions that you can ask clients. Is that correct, Sarah?
Yes, I will add that and send it to you momentarily. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And my message will also contain the link to today's session recording, and it will have an evaluation link in it. We'd love to hear your impressions of the webinar. And we'll also send an invitation to sign up for the next webinar in this online community of practice series. So thanks everyone for your time, and we wish you a wonderful day, and in this busy season, all the best. Stay well, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.